My friends, good afternoon. What is happening around the Detroit Lions right now may seem quiet on the surface, but once you start looking closely, several storylines are beginning to connect, and they could have a major impact on how this team enters training camp. With camp now just a couple of weeks away, every roster battle, every player development, and every off-field situation suddenly becomes much more important because the coaching staff is about to begin making decisions that will shape the 2026 season. One of the biggest topics continues to revolve around Terrion Arnold. There has been growing discussion regarding the possibility that he could eventually be placed on the commissioner's exempt list, and that conversation has gained even more attention after comments from Albert Breer. According to Breer, the current situation lines up with the type of circumstance where the NFL has previously used the exempt list, allowing the league to remove a player from active participation while the legal process continues without forcing the team into an immediate football decision. The reason this remains such a significant story is because the legal process is still unresolved. Even if everything were to move forward before a final legal outcome, there is still the possibility of league discipline afterward. That uncertainty creates a situation where it becomes difficult to imagine an NFL team immediately bringing him onto its roster while so many unanswered questions remain. Until there is more clarity, this situation will continue to be monitored closely because it affects both the player's future and the league's handling of these types of cases. While that story develops away from the football field, the Lions themselves are quietly preparing for one of the most fascinating training camps they have had in recent years. One player who has started generating real conversation is Jackson Meeks, and for good reason. The Lions may have found something very interesting by converting Meeks into a tight end. His background as a wide receiver immediately gives him an advantage as a pass catcher, and that could allow him to become a unique weapon within Detroit's offense. Rather than simply adding another traditional blocking tight end, the Lions may have created a player capable of giving the offense additional flexibility. When you look at the current tight end room, each player seems to fill a different role. Sam LaPorta remains the premier receiving threat. Tyler Conklin brings valuable blocking ability. Brock Wright has established himself as another dependable blocker. Jackson Meeks, meanwhile, could provide another reliable receiving option with natural hands developed during his time at wide receiver. That balance could become extremely valuable throughout a long NFL season. Injuries are inevitable, and having multiple players capable of stepping into different responsibilities allows Detroit to maintain stability without dramatically changing the offense. If one receiving option misses time, another player with similar receiving skills is already available. If a blocking specialist is unavailable, there's another player capable of filling that responsibility as well. It creates depth that goes beyond simply having extra bodies on the roster. Training camp will reveal just how quickly Meeks adapts to the position, but his development immediately becomes one of the most intriguing stories to watch over the coming weeks. The preseason should provide an excellent opportunity to see how comfortable he looks against live competition. And honestly, this year's preseason may be one of the most meaningful that Detroit has experienced in quite some time. There are legitimate competitions taking place throughout the roster. The battle at left guard could shape the offensive line entering week 1. The backup quarterback competition deserves attention because every team understands how valuable that position becomes over the course of a season. The race for the 4th tight end spot is wide open. The competition for the 5th wide receiver position could produce surprises. Linebacker depth featuring players like Malcolm Rodriguez and Jimmy Rolder will be closely evaluated. Even the secondary presents multiple opportunities for players to earn significant roles before the regular season begins. Adding even more excitement is the expectation that Detroit's starters are expected to receive preseason playing time. That gives fans a chance to see much more than fringe roster players. It also allows everyone to get an early look at how some of the off-season adjustments are beginning to take shape before the regular season officially kicks off. Another player generating tremendous optimism is Isaac Tesla. There is growing belief that Tesla could be on the verge of a breakout season after showing noticeable improvement throughout the offseason. One of the biggest areas of emphasis has reportedly been improving his speed, acceleration, and explosiveness off the line of scrimmage. Those improvements began showing up during OTAs and minicamp, where he consistently drew attention for his ability to stretch the field. Considering what he accomplished last season despite limited production, the potential ceiling becomes even more intriguing. His touchdown production demonstrated his ability to make an impact whenever opportunities came his way, and now the expectation is that those opportunities could increase significantly. If Tesla develops into the reliable number 3 receiver many believe he can become, the Lions' offense suddenly becomes even more dangerous. His size gives Jared Goff another valuable target, particularly on third downs and inside the red zone, while his presence also has the potential to create additional space for Jameson Williams and the rest of Detroit's receiving core. That is exactly why so many eyes will be focused on him once training camp begins. The flashes have already appeared during off-season practices, but now everyone wants to see whether those improvements carry over once the pads come on and the competition becomes much more physical. With all of these storylines developing at the same time, one question starts becoming impossible to ignore. Which of these situations will end up having the biggest impact on the Lions before the regular season even begins? What do you think will be the most important storyline to watch during training camp? That is why the Lions are entering this training camp with a completely different level of excitement compared to a year ago. It is no longer just about seeing veterans get back into football shape. This is about watching young players prove they are ready to become legitimate contributors on a team that believes it can compete at a very high level. Another player who perfectly represents that opportunity is Tyleik Williams. There is a growing feeling that Williams is positioned to make one of the biggest second-year jumps on the entire roster. If you go back and study how he performed from the opening weeks of last season through the final stretch, the improvement becomes very noticeable. Early in the year, he was still adjusting to the speed and physicality of the NFL, but as the season progressed, his confidence continued to grow. His technique improved, his hand usage became more consistent, and perhaps most importantly, he looked far more comfortable against the run. By the final weeks of the season, many of the small details that separate good defensive linemen from productive NFL starters were beginning to show up on tape. Instead of simply relying on physical strength, Williams was winning with leverage, positioning, and better recognition. That kind of development is exactly what coaches hope to see from a young defensive tackle entering his second season. Now imagine adding that improved version of Tyleik Williams alongside a healthy Alim McNeill and Aiden Hutchinson. Just getting those three on the field together immediately changes the outlook for Detroit's defensive front. Health alone should make this unit significantly stronger than it was at various points last season. Alim McNeill returning at full strength gives Detroit one of its most disruptive interior defenders back. Hutchinson remains the centerpiece of the pass rush, capable of changing games with his pressure off the edge. If Williams continues the progress he showed late last year, the middle of the defensive line suddenly becomes much more difficult for opposing offenses to handle. The Lions also expect additional help from the rest of the rotation. DJ Wonnum brings valuable experience to the edge group, while rookie Derek Moore begins what many hope will be a steady development process throughout his first NFL season. Like most rookies, Moore will likely improve as the season moves forward, gaining confidence with every snap and becoming more comfortable within Detroit's defensive system. That combination of improved health, player development, and added depth creates real optimism that the defensive line can take a meaningful step forward this season. What makes all of these discussions so interesting is that none of them are based on unrealistic expectations. They are based on players already showing tangible signs of improvement during offseason work, or on logical roster construction that gives Detroit more flexibility than it had before. Jackson Meeks offers intriguing versatility at tight end. Isaac Tesla appears ready for a much larger offensive role after an encouraging offseason. Tyleik Williams seems prepared to capitalize on the momentum he built late last season. At the same time, nearly every position group has meaningful competitions that could reshape the final 53-man roster before week 1 even arrives. Training camp is where all of those projections finally meet reality. Every practice will matter. Every preseason snap will give someone an opportunity to climb the depth chart. Coaches will be evaluating consistency, effort, execution, and reliability on every single rep. Fans often focus on the stars, but some of the biggest stories over the next few weeks may come from players fighting simply to earn a roster spot. That is exactly why this year's camp feels different. There are established stars leading the roster, but there is also an impressive group of young talent trying to prove they deserve larger roles. Those internal competitions could ultimately make Detroit a deeper and more complete football team once the regular season begins. Over the next several weeks, we'll finally begin getting answers. Will Jackson Meeks secure a meaningful place in the offense? Can Isaac Tesla deliver the breakout season so many people are predicting? Will Tyleik Williams emerge as one of the biggest defensive surprises on the roster? And which position battles will completely change the depth chart before the regular season kicks off? That is also why patience will be so important over the next several weeks. Every year there are players who generate excitement during offseason workouts, but training camp is where those expectations either begin to look realistic or start to fade away. For Detroit, the encouraging part is that many of these conversations are centered around players who have already shown legitimate signs of growth instead of simply being built on speculation. Take Isaac Tesla as an example. The excitement surrounding him is not just because fans want another offensive weapon. It is because the improvements that have been discussed throughout the offseason are beginning to translate onto the football field. His work on improving his acceleration and overall speed has already become noticeable during organized team activities and minicamp, and that gives the coaching staff something tangible to build on once full contact practices begin. His rookie production already demonstrated one thing very clearly. Even without a large volume of opportunities, he showed an ability to make impactful plays, especially near the goal line. Now, the expectation is completely different. Instead of simply being a situational contributor, the opportunity is there for him to become a consistent part of Detroit's weekly offensive game plan. That possibility becomes even more exciting when you consider how balanced this offense could be. Defenses already have to account for multiple proven playmakers, and adding another reliable receiving threat forces opposing defensive coordinators into even more difficult decisions. If extra attention is devoted to stopping one